She didn't scream. She didn't beg. She whispered, and the world listened. In a culture obsessed with noise, Oprah Winfrey mastered the art of emotional silence. Not silence as absence, but as resonance. She turned vulnerability into currency, and her tears into a universal language. But what if that language was never just about healing? What if it was about power? Born in rural Mississippi in 1954 to a teenage single mother, Oprah's early life was scarred by trauma. Abuse, neglect, poverty. These weren't just backstories. They were her training grounds. In the crucible of suffering, Oprah forged something unique, a radar for pain, and more importantly, a method to reflect it back. She didn't merely survive, she transcended. But the deeper question remains, did she also weaponize that pain? The rise of Oprah is a masterclass in emotional contagion. As psychologists define it, emotional contagion is the unconscious mimicry of another person's emotions. A smile begets a smile. A tear can spread like wildfire. Oprah didn't just understand this, she embodied it. Her show wasn't a talk show. It was a stage for catharsis. She cried with her guests. She gasped with them. She nodded, not just in empathy, but in perfect synchrony with the collective soul of America. But beneath the warmth, a cold calculation was at work. The Oprah Effect, the phenomenon where her endorsement could turn any book, product, or person into a sensation, wasn't born from charm. It was engineered through the psychological principle of the availability heuristic. When something is easily recalled, vivid, emotional, unforgettable, it feels more true. Oprah didn't just tell stories. She branded them into the minds of millions. Her interviews weren't about information. They were about imprinting. The shiver in her voice, the wide eyes, the perfectly timed silence. They weren't just emotional responses. They were tools. Repetition, amplification, familiarity. Through consistent exposure to her emotional framework, viewers began to internalize her values, trust her instincts, and, most crucially, associate her with truth. But was this empathy or performance? In the theater of suffering, Oprah played every role. The victim, the healer, the guide. Her genius wasn't just in feeling with people. It was in being people. She didn't interview guests. She channeled them. She became their mirror, their echo, and in doing so, she turned herself into a myth. As we begin to peel back the layers, we must ask, did Oprah's empire grow because she was empathetic, or because she learned how to simulate empathy better than anyone alive? Oprah's story is built on pain, but it is pain repackaged. Not raw, not uncontrolled. Her traumas were not hidden, but neither were they left to wander. They were curated, scripted. They were carefully selected tools, brought out at just the right moment, to elicit maximum impact. Psychologists understand empathy not as a single trait, but a spectrum, ranging from effective empathy, feeling what others feel, to cognitive empathy, understanding what others feel. Effective empathy makes us cry during movies. Cognitive empathy lets con artists read their victims. Oprah undeniably had both, but the cognitive side, the strategic side, was where her empire was truly built. Every segment, every episode, every moment of silence was designed to generate emotional investment. And investment, psychologically, is the precursor to loyalty. Think of how cult leaders operate, by absorbing the pain of their followers and reassigning it new meaning. Oprah didn't just ask audiences to listen, she asked them to feel. And then she offered salvation, a book, a product, a life philosophy. But the boundary between healing and manipulation is razor thin. By turning her studio into a sanctuary of suffering, Oprah transformed pain into spectacle. It became entertainment. Tears became programming. Sobs became ratings. And viewers became addicts, not to drama, but to resolution. The resolution she alone appeared to offer. And it worked. From obscure talk show host to global media mogul, Oprah's ascent paralleled America's own cultural shift, from stoicism to emotional openness. She didn't follow the wave. She made it. And every teardrop from her stage was a tidal force. Yet here lies the psychological sleight of hand. Emotional mirroring creates illusionary intimacy. When someone reflects your feelings, you trust them more, even when you shouldn't. Politicians do it. Narcissists do it. Cult leaders do it. Oprah did it. So we must ask, was her empath? In an age before social media, Oprah was a living prototype of what we now call the authentic influencer. But authenticity is a double-edged sword. When weaponized, it becomes the ultimate disguise. And Oprah wielded it with surgical precision. The public watched her struggles, her weight battles, her childhood abuse, her insecurities, broadcast on national television. She was not above her audience. She was within them, or so it seemed. Here, the psychology deepens. The concept of parasocial relationships explains how people form one-sided emotional bonds with media figures. Viewers felt they knew Oprah. They trusted her, but she did not know them. The intimacy was an illusion, one she carefully cultivated. As media scholars would argue, this illusion was not accidental. It was by design. Oprah knew that trust equals influence, and influence equals control. By making herself vulnerable, she was engaging in what psychologists call strategic self-disclosure, the intentional revelation of personal details to foster connection and loyalty. And it worked, not just for ratings, for shaping culture. Oprah didn't just influence what people watched. She changed what they believed. Alternative medicine, New Age spirituality, self-help philosophies, many controversial, some dangerous, found legitimacy under her spotlight. Dr. Phil, Dr. Oz, The Secret, all flourished because of her platform. Her empathy, her trustworthiness, her realness. These were her brand. But brands are built to sell. So again, we face the unsettling question. Was Oprah's vulnerability a gift to her audience, or a calculated tool of empire building? Oprah's power isn't rooted in facts. It's rooted in feelings that feel like facts. This is the psychological trap, known as the availability heuristic. Simply put, when we can easily recall an emotional example, like a heartbreaking testimony or a miraculous recovery, we are more likely to believe that example represents the norm. Oprah didn't just present stories. She amplified them. She presented personal experiences with the intensity of moral truths. And we believed her, not because the data supported it, but because the story moved us. This is how The Secret, a pseudoscientific idea that thoughts alone can shape reality, became a global bestseller. It wasn't the logic. It was the emotion, the hope. Oprah didn't argue it was true. She showed people who felt it was true, and we trusted her. In this emotional ecosystem, reason took a backseat to resonance. It didn't matter whether the ideas were scientifically sound. It mattered how they made people feel. And Oprah became the gatekeeper of those feelings. She created a world where the emotional experience of truth became more powerful than objective truth itself. That is not just influence. That is psychological supremacy. But what happens when the stories we believe in are comforting lies? What happens when the healer becomes the hypnotist? It's not that she didn't feel. It's that she knew how her feelings looked on camera, and she knew exactly when to deploy them. Because the tears of a billionaire have weight, and they move markets. Empathy is one of humanity's most cherished traits. It binds us. It heals us. But in the hands of a master communicator, it becomes something else. It becomes leverage. Oprah's show became a pulpit, and her word gospel. Millions treated her recommendations as commandments. This wasn't just fandom, it was devotion. And while much of her influence led to positive change, not all of it did. She introduced the world to voices that would later be criticized for pseudoscience and misinformation. Yet their legitimacy came not from credentials, but from proximity to Oprah. If she trusted them, millions did too. This is the final psychological layer, authority bias. When a figure of perceived authority endorses an idea, people are far more likely to accept it without scrutiny. Oprah's emotional intelligence made her appear infallibly wise, and wisdom, when unchallenged, turns to dogma. She blurred the lines between empathy and endorsement, between listening and legitimizing. She opened a stage for suffering, but didn't always vet what followed. The audience was primed to believe, not question, because Oprah had already earned their emotional allegiance. Even her own brand was cultivated with cult-like precision. OWN wasn't just a network. It was a declaration. To own your story, your truth, your trauma, but also your allegiance to hers. And so we arrive at the dark irony. In building an empire on empathy, Oprah also built a machine of emotional dependency. Her viewers didn't just watch, they needed her. Her approval, her guidance, her healing. What began as emotional connection ended as emotional control. Block 6, the reflection, was it real? Or just power in disguise? So we asked the final question. Was Oprah's rise a triumph of compassion, or the most brilliant psychological performance of our time? Perhaps the truth is somewhere in between. Oprah Winfrey is a complex figure, a survivor, a trailblazer, a cultural architect, but also undeniably a strategist. Her command of human psychology wasn't accidental. It was the bedrock of her ascent. She turned wounds into wisdom, but also into influence. Her empire was built not just on what she gave, but on what she elicited. Emotion, trust, loyalty, and at times obedience. But does that make her a manipulator? Or simply the greatest emotional communicator in modern history? We must confront the uneasy truth that empathy, when magnified to this scale, loses its purity. It becomes currency. It becomes architecture. It becomes a system of influence so total, so immersive, that it shapes not only opinions, but identities. Still, there is a lesson to be found here. Empathy is powerful, but power always distorts. To give love without condition is divine, but to wield love strategically is human. In the end, Oprah's story is not just about her. It's about us. It's about how deeply we crave to be seen, to be understood, to be healed. It's about how willing we are to trust someone who makes us feel, and how dangerous that can be when emotion eclipses reason. But perhaps the most profound takeaway is this. Oprah's empire didn't rise because she deceived us. It rose because she understood us, at our weakest, at our most vulnerable. And she reflected us back to ourselves, shining, broken, longing to believe. So, was her empathy always altruistic? Maybe not, but it was effective. And maybe, just maybe, that's why it changed the world. Let this video serve as a reminder. Feel deeply, but think clearly. Trust wisely, and never forget, empathy can lift us or blind us. Thank you for watching this video. Please subscribe to our channel and like this video. Also, activate the notification bell to be alerted to our next uploads. See you in the next video. And Oprah, above all else, reminds us of our most haunting reflection, that even our noblest emotions, when broadcast to millions, can become tools in the hands of those who understand them best.